te voglio fare una casa tanto lontana, vicina di confine dell'amore, t'aspetto a braccia aperte, di da stufato luce, vicina stu brucia, te voglio rascare, t'aspetto a braccia aperte, di da stufato.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. I'm delighted. I was conceived in 1965 because I was born on the 21st of July, 1966. 29, she already had 2 children, 6 years and 8 years younger than me. And my father was 8 years older than her. And she was to become a primary teacher, but she was not working yet because she wanted to look after the children first. And the circumstances of conception, my father had been on a trip, work trip, and he had come back. And obviously, you know, fully in love with my mother all his life and passionate. I was conceived, I can't remember exactly whether during her menstruation or soon after. So I was meant to be conceived. And so these are the circumstances. Of course, I hadn't probably been planned to be conceived, but my parents loved each other very much, and having 2 boys, obviously there was the hope to have a girl, and obviously the conception was very welcome.
Where was it? What was the...
Well, I was in Potenza, the capital of the Basilicata region in southern Italy, a beautiful region which actually still is filled with rich culture, with ancient roots, tracing as far back as the Paleolithic age, you know, so prehistoric age. And many of its people were and still are immersed in a very simple life of agriculture and seasonal tradition that has endured for thousands of years. So life in Basilicata was and still is pulsating with culture, art, music, a festival. You know, each town, a little town, has its own tradition, cuisine tradition, festival, summer festival, and that's how I was brought up. And fortunately, the region was ignored by the Allied bombers during the Second World War, and Basilicata did not suffer serious consequences. So after the war, territorial reforms from the government initiative like Cassa del Mezzogiorno contributed to mitigate the effects of the crisis, and the migration phenomenon that until then was very strong but decreased because of all these government reforms, which obviously were a boost for the agriculture and industrialization. So I was conceived, you know, around this time of hopefulness after the war, but it's still a few years ago. But you know, because the consequences were not severe. The region had been ignored by the war, so obviously the trauma was less sitting inside the population. And I think you know, that was the background when I was conceived and reflecting on my parents' moods. Although my father, you know, I will tell later, my father had witnessed the war as a teenager, but he was already, you know, he had a job and he loved his job. So he was living in Potenza because he had met my mother during a farm survey in this little town near Potenza, which actually has Greek origins. And yes, because it's from the side facing Greece, and a lot of terminologies as its roots in Greek language. My mother's has typical Greek features, nose, and my father, when he saw her, just was love at first sight. He loves the simplicity and ancient roots of the traditions of this town. And she was 16 when she met my father. And then she was studying in a college in Salerno, 2 hours from a town. And so they were seeing, well, my father always told me the story about, going and seeing her from outside the gate, because she was studying with nuns. So, you can imagine, and writing letters, beautiful letters that my mother still has. And so, yes, and then they got married when she was 18. And she was not even 19 when she had a first child. And she was having, in those days, if women, their first pregnancy had some blood discharge during pregnancy, they recommended bed rest. Yes. And I had the same phenomenon with my first pregnancy, because it's quite common, but now they give, some progesterone to support for 2-3 months, just at the beginning, to support the pregnancy. But in those days, they just recommended bed rest. And I think that created some anxiety in my mother, as, normal as in every woman would have. And I can see in my brother, this transmission of anxiety. I mean, she gave all natural birth, let's say free birth. In those days, it was really free. It was undisturbed birth to all of us. But I can see her anxiety, of course, the worry of losing this child unnecessarily. But that's what, they did in those days. And so, I was conceived, and shall I tell also a little bit about the birth?
Please, before that, you have 2 brothers, I guess.
Yes.
And what is the difference of your conception? I mean, your first brother was born when, and then the second, and then told us about yours.
6 years before me, one, and 8 years, so 66. I mean, and then the other one, the eldest, 8 years before me. So it was really the beginning of my father's career, and so obviously closer to the war experience, but not that close, also because. And maybe that was actually determining also my father's decision to live in Potenza, this uncontaminated region, uncontaminated naturally, because the breathtaking landscape and coastlines still now is relatively uncontaminated. And this, geological setting for scientists from all over the world, because there are these caves dated back as far as the Paleolithic age. So, I was conceived with this beauty at the background, indirectly, reflecting on my parents. My mama is from that region. My father was from, his parents are from Rome. My mom, his mother's from Rome, a town near Rome, and father, a town near Naples. My mother from that region. And I think, I remember this devoted love from my father, from my mother, towards all his life. I mean, I haven't seen, normally couples, the love fades or is substituted by common interest, other things. My father always had this devotion to my mother and to women in general. I remember he almost made a bow when he greeted, especially a friend of my mother, shaking the hand, always this reverence. and respect, really a gentleman, I would say. But I will tell you later about, you know, the qualities of my family. I know one thing about the birth of my brothers. My mother gave birth to my brothers in a hospital. When she gave birth in a private clinic, but still in Italy, private clinics are not really private 100%. They're still supported by the government. So a smaller clinic. So I don't know really why, because I don't know, maybe she wanted to have just a more personal experience. And I tell you something, that while she was in a room, lie down in bed with her mother, the midwife left the room because she thought I was going to be born in the next few hours. And my head was already sticking out with this mass of black hair, even on my, everywhere, on my ears, and, you know, black hair. And, you know, I interpret that as really an eagerness to come out. Of course, I was probably happy in the womb, but I wanted to come out, meet my mother, my curiosity probably to explore. And my mother, you know, they rang the oh, she's already coming, and you know, the midwife coming back and helping. But my mother always told me that, you know, intervention in those days were a rarity. Most women actually still were delivering at home. It was really the beginning of the, you know, birth at the hospital. But cesarean sections were really a rarity, at least in the south, in that region, I guess in the whole south of Italy. And so, you know, there wasn't a fear of intervention of complicated birth and things, you know, so.
Yeah, great. So actually summarizing the main values of the times, or of the time element, can you give us the keywords of the values as you see them?
There was a sense of flow, of things happening, just happening in a very undisturbed way.
Very nice.
That was the feeling I also had as a child, the way I grew up, you know.
And about the challenges of that time period or space? If
the challenges, maybe, you know, I was living, well, when I was conceived or still around the time of conception, I don't know, because, you know, there was support from the community. The community friends were everywhere. If my parents needed help, my grandmother from Stigliano, my mom's town, could come over and help us. Not for so long, unfortunately, because she died when I was 2. But, you know, my grandmother from this town near Naples could come and help us. And I'll tell you later, especially for a year, stayed with my brothers. So there was a sense of, you know, community very strong and support. So, and you know, this love between my parents. So I don't know what, you know, the challenges culturally or politically, you know, politically the situation, I think there was, the Basilicata was a democracy, Christian democracy. So a quite moderate country, no extremism in those days. It was a provincial town where, you know, gossiping also, you know, like all provincial towns, of course, the values of the support from the community, but also, you know, the gossiping. So doing things also for the sake of the image, you know what I mean? Which actually then later on I would find a little bit tight. And that's what actually made me go, because it was too tight for me. But not major challenges. I have to say.
Career opportunities?
Well, opportunities, yes, because as I said, the support, and my mama was she knew that she was going to start, working and be a primary teacher. So there were no worries about, also because in those days there was a high demand of teachers, and my father was working for the region already. So as for the agriculture, forestry, and the food department of the region. So they were both, settled and just very eager to set up a family, when they conceived the first children. And later in life, I never, ever experienced any trust issues between my parents, which normally it happened at some point. And so in retrospective, you can assume what were the values already there. So values of community, of support, of cooperation, kids always coming, and my brother's kids coming to the house and exchanging, knowing each other's friends, and always having a friend at home around. So that was the life.
Right, Italian hospitality, Mediterranean hospitality.
Very much, and especially my father always filling the table with food and everything when we had someone for. And then, I later ended up living in a quite disconnected, in some way, city, like, London. And I will tell you a little bit later, which is quite interesting. Yes.
What was the name of your mom?
Rosa. Rosa, Rosetta, Rosa, like the flower. My father's name, Raffaele.
Oh, good.
Raffaele. My brothers, Giuseppe and Francesco.
Right.
Francesco, like Francesco, yes.
So can we have a better look at Rose and meet her? So who was she as you remember her? What were the best qualities in a Rosa, which you can bring to our conversation?
My mama was a very, she was very devoted to the family. She, obviously when I was a little bit older, and I remember her coming back home, cooking, from teaching, because in Italy, school still now ends at 1:30, unlike Anglo-Saxon countries where it ends at 3:30, even 4. So still, balance life between work and family. So she could come home and cook straight away, not even just dropping it back. So the table was ready, 2 o'clock, my father coming back from work, because, Potenza, 70,000 inhabitants, so not a big city. So still able to come back, have a nap on the chair in front of the TV after eating, and then go back to work from 4 to 7 o'clock. So hard worker. And so my mom always made sure that, the table was ready for my father coming back, all sitting at the table. So lunch was a sacred time. And she was very, very sweet. And I have lovely memories of these years spent together, just my mom and I, when I was 6. So I was doing the first year of primary school in this town, 2 hours drive from Potenza, because that's where my mom got the job. So, she had to go there, and it was too far to commute every day, 4 hours a day. So we were staying, and I was so happy to have my mom all for me and sharing the same bed, falling asleep hand in hand. And I remember knee on my, knee and praying. And we were staying, we were renting the room of this couple, elderly couple. And I remember cooking the potatoes on the fire, these little things. And then waiting at her in the morning. She was watching me until I disappeared, going to school. I mean, I was 6, going to school on my own, of course, a little town. And then she went to her school. And sometimes she took me with her, and we were crossing these fields, either to watch a film with her friends, her colleagues. So we had to cross a field even at night. And she was singing this song of the light, you know, those insects? They're coming in summer, in June, that have light. And she was singing this song, you know, Lucciola, Lucciola, vieni da me, come to me, che ti do il pane. You know, really, you know, these are memories that they stay with you for life, as if it was now. And, you know, and we watch films with this, especially Sunday. And so, yeah, I have these lovely memories, you know, of sleeping with my mother and telling me stories that she then told my children. And my father came every other weekend to stay with us. And my brothers were looked after by my father's mother, who was always available if we needed help. And she stayed almost a year, a school year with them, so that, you know, she could look after. They were still young. I mean, I was 6, so they were one 12, the other 14. So, you know, she was there. And I remember that feeling of looking forward to seeing my father when he came. And so we were united. And then sometimes, you know, during the longer holiday, we went to Potenza Stay, the family reunited. So I did my first year of primary school there, and I have really, really all these lovely, you know, memories of nature, always nature, you know, crossing the fields and picnicking, having picnics with the friends. Yes.
Let's meet Raffaele. So
and I have to say something about my mother. My mother always was anxious about certain things, and I used to say even hyperprotective, always worried. In fact, I asked my daughter the other day, can you tell me some other qualities that I missed about Nonna, Granny? And she said, oh yes, I remember always worried about wearing the woolen, you know, vest under the clothes. But then, you know, you can look at it in both ways, as anxiety or care. So, but she always was anxious about the possible dangers about something. And I don't know exactly where this anxiety came from, because I don't know much of her. She had a normal, you know, childhood in this little town. So whether losing her mother unexpectedly at the age of 31. So, but she was really, even with my daughters, oh, don't do that because you may fall. Oh, don't do that. Oh, don't do that. Fortunately, you know, with my experience, I, you know, learned to not to manage this anxiety that, you know, I can see in my brothers, the same, especially in one, overprotection. And so I could master that because of obviously my awareness, the work I do, and my experiences. But I have to say that a little bit of this, you know, worry, especially Sahara, that is more active, I got it from her a little bit. But then, you know, on the other hand, this care about, you know, details and, you know, and things. And yes, and she was a very also intuitive woman, but also quite conditioned by the provincial, you know, living in a community, so also concerned about, you know, that, you know, offering a good image, which is typical of provincial towns. And, you know, this particular, you know, qualities. My father, all the values he transmitted to us, honesty, in you know, it was coherent and with high integrity. And he was a very caring, sweet man. I mean, I have memories of him kissing me and tucking the sheet in the bed while saying goodnight. And I remember his hands, you know, very protective, his way of holding. You know, his mother, I don't think it was very expansive emotionally to him. She was more with us, with her grandchildren, but according to some stories and things, she was so, but still he was very, very, actually more than my mother. My mother, when we were kids, was, but then growing up, she became a little bit more, less expansive. But my father always, I still have a pile of letters he sent me when I moved, especially when I moved to London. And he just loved writing letters, and he loved paintings. But unfortunately, when he became head of the agriculture and the forestry and the food department, and he started traveling to Brussels regularly, he stopped painting. So we have in my mom's house, you know, apartment, all the walls are full of his paintings, some of my paintings, but mainly, you know, his painting. And he stopped. And I felt that how it impacted also on his being, you know, his, I just, as a child, I loved watching him painting. I remember the smell of the serpent, you know, the liquid. And I knew, oh, Daddy started painting. I just smelled that. And he loved classical music. So, you know, he just played, especially opera. So he was an avid of reading and learning. And in his latest life, he was getting very interested in psychology as well through me. And I remember him always, when we travel, he always talked, you know, all together, we kids, he always taught us about plants, trees, animals, and we were fascinating. I mean, think of now kids on the phone in the car, they get bored, and we were just fascinated by his stories. And I remember this story of, he told us once that they had done studies of the effect of music on the cow's production of milk, classical music, and breastfeeding. So, you know, he was also interested in this psychological aspect of animals. And then he was getting, when I started studying psychology and he came to visit me in Rome, when he went for work, we always had lunch together, and he was transmitting me, and he was getting interested in psychology as well, because he wanted me to study, like most parents in those days, to study law, because, you know, psychology in those days was not really, wasn't probably not even, no, I think there were only 2 faculties in all the whole of Italy. And I did enroll at law, but after 2 months, I just realized it was not for me. I just follow my passion. I didn't lose the year, fortunately, because it was within November, I can remember. And he accepted that. It just, you know, I was concerned about the opportunities of, you know, work, jobs, and like, you know, most parents. And so, you know, and he accepted that. And he accepted my drive to travel. You know, when I was 17 with the school, they were organizing a trip to England for the English, for the language, and he was still a little bit, you know, 17. But then he accepted that in the name of culture, education, and things, he did it. But yes, I think the main values he transmitted is care and equalitarianism. My father dealt with the poor, the minister, in the same way. And that's, I think, is one of the greatest teaching I witnessed. I mean, I could see him, you know, the way he interacted with the builders, someone coming home with kindness and respect, and the same way he was with as I said, the minister. And then honesty. As I said, there never been any trust issues between my parents. He had the moments of, when something could trigger him and he raised his voice. But I never seen him, I don't remember any smack or anything like that, but he could raise his voice. And I don't know what could trigger, and I always wonder where there was something sitting in him that he had never worked through, or also because in those days, still now, but imagine, men had to always appear all right, and any concern, especially in the name of the family, was not really faced or addressed. Even if he had a headache, he was not the kind of person, oh, I have a headache, sharing easily. Yeah.
And Giuseppe and Francesco?
My brother, yes, they were very protective of me. I remember my brother Francesco, my eldest brother, picking me up at the preschool. I went to the nursery when I was 3. So my mama kept me at home, and I think that's when she started working. And it was a nun school not far from the house. And he picked me up. The other one was still a little bit young to do it, but Francesco did it most of the time, and he was very, very protective. I was the only girl and the younger. Giuseppe was also very sweet, affectionate. The other one was a little bit more bossy, Francesco, and there were some conflicts between the brothers sometimes. I think, like the old elder brother, a bit bossy. And so sometimes I remember this attitude, and they also felt proud of being the eldest and, be protective of me. But that was a sweet thing. Over time, it changed because when I went to Rome, physical separation over time can create also a little bit of distance. But, whenever I go there, they always welcome, they're always hospitable. Giuseppe would call me more often. Francesco is more, maybe he felt, even, I don't know, unconsciously, I don't know, that I left, them in a way. Of course, he knows that I had to follow my drive, but maybe that's the feeling. So he is very much affected by the geographical distance. So now I'm even further, I was in London. First I was in Rome, then in London, now here. So you didn't, but then when we speak on the phone, always the bonding is always there, so always comes back. Yeah.
And your grandparents, what was the...
Oh, my grandparents, my mom's mother died when I was still young, 2 years. Yeah. But for some reason that you will understand, I always felt, I don't remember her, but I think there must be something in my cell, my body memories, because when I was not even 2, because she died when I was 2, maybe 1 year and a bit. So my mother has completed, she breastfed all of us for the first 9 months. And so completed breastfeeding, I had got a whooping cough. And one day, actually, I was even choking, and my father put me upside down, put a finger in my throat and took the dense mucus. And then that actually stayed in my life, because I tend sometimes, if I don't pay attention, sometimes to, it happens, few episodes that I do link to that incident. So she left me with my grandparents, her parents, in Stigliano, this little town, 1.5 hour drive from Potenza, to benefit from the mountain air. But, I was still very young. So just for a month can be a long time at that age, and she came every weekend. They came every weekend to see me. And when they picked me up to go back to Potenza, I was being held by my grandmother, and I turned my back. I didn't want to go. And that was probably my way of expressing my resentment. Or maybe I was getting attached to my grandmother. And that's why I'm saying that something is in my body, which, and you know, daughters are always connecting with their mothers because of this sharing of eggs. Even, you know, when she was pregnant, my grandmother, she already had my eggs, because, you know, these new foundings, you know, that they share the same. So I always felt that I had this mother, when I look in the mirror, missing, you know, her, because if she kept me for a month and I didn't want to go, she must have really nurtured me. And that had become a little bit my style, attachment style, way of, because when someone goes away, for instance, my husband goes away to Africa for work, and when he comes back, I have always a little bit of anxiety of separation, and then he comes back, I have almost like a detachment. It doesn't last long, but I have this, and I can see the link with that experience, because he stayed with me with every time someone very close to me left for a period and came back. I have this like almost resentment, or say, what did I do that? Why are you leaving? You know? So, so my grandfather, unfortunately, also, I don't have many memories, because he was traumatized by the war. So he was in the war, and he fell in the shower, not during the war. While he was in the war, he was having a shower, he fell and he hit his head. And this must have had the repercussions apart from the war, because, you know, the war is called the injury of the brain, so leaves scars, especially in some people. So he fell, and I don't know what they did at the hospital, but since then he started suffering from excruciating headaches. So whenever we went to Stigliano, you know, Easter, you know, this atmosphere of celebration and welcoming, they always, you know, we always received, he was almost always in bed. And I think then there was, you know, because, you know, the link between trauma and Alzheimer, but probably was not Alzheimer, was just the effect of that deterioration. So I was still young when he died. And so the relationship I had with him, it was always, you know, going there, talking with him. Sometimes he stood up, he went for a walk, but because of his pain, there wasn't a really free and loving interaction, you know. And my father's father died of a tragic accident. I was 9. I remember very well. We had just driven, we had just arrived in Potenza from a long drive, 4 hours drive from our seaside house on the Roman coast. And he was run over. He had been run over by a car driven by 18 years old kid who had just got his driving license, and he was going to pick up my cousin, who was 3 years, from the nursery. So it could have happened on the way back, and it would have been even worse tragedy. And I remember we had just arrived at the phone, you know, do you remember the phones on the walls ringing? Then my father, all the family went to drive again back to, you know, same direction towards Naples. And so I remember him as someone very healthy, he was probably 70. I can't remember the age he died, but, you know, I was 9. And he was a quiet man. He loved quiet, and he loved reading the newspaper, not be disturbed. by the kids and things. So it was not really so present in terms of, relationship. But my grandmother, she was, and I have really lovely memories of her. When we went to Christmas, she always arranged, the dinner, Christmas dinner, lunch. We gather. My father had 3 sisters, all still alive. And so can you imagine their families and all sitting at the same table. So really lovely families. We built the tents on the terrace, which was the apartment, the 6th floor, with views over the islands, Naples, Procida, Ischia, Capri, all the view. And we built this hut with cousin. And she complains a little bit, don't get the sheets, don't get this, but in the end she accepted. And I have something about a lovely memory. My grandmother, when she came and she stayed with us in Potenza, I remember me studying in the kitchen sometime, because I liked studying, doing my homework in the kitchen on my parents' bed, changing place. I just love that. And I was in the kitchen, I was studying Marx and Manifesto. And, teenager, I was probably 12, 13, teenagers, argumentative attitude. And I was talking and reflecting and expressing my viewing. And since she started talking me, the scientist, and she always talked to me like this. She was actually a very curious, intelligent woman, and she always engaged in conversation with me. So we used to go a walk on the seaside, where we had the house on the seaside, along the canal, with the dog as well, my dog. And we had all this conversation about everything. And she was very interested and questioning, curious. So there was something, a connection, a strong connection. So I spent a lot of time with her. And she passed away at the age of 94. And again, you will see the connection with what my view I developed later on. My father passed away 2 years before she passed away. And my sisters decided not to tell her. Mm-hmm. And I never felt comfortable about their decision, because I think the truth, I know that they were well-meaning, it was to protect her, but I think a mother knows, she always knows. I mean, my father used to call her all the time. And how would she? They told her that he was in America for work, and I never felt comfortable, but I couldn't interfere with their decision. So, and I know deep down that she must have picked up in conversation. She must have, or just a feeling. And that contributed, because she started losing memory. Yeah. Almost like a defense mechanism not to cut off. Yeah. With a reality she knew. Yeah. And probably she couldn't understand why they had hidden. Yeah. And because of my attention to what is beyond the manifest, what the common truths are, but what we see beyond the scene, the manifest. But people don't see this. And then, so what a major loss for me. David, my husband, was just in time to meet her, because, I had a very, very strong. And I also realized through the relationship with her, the importance of the grandparents. Yeah. As the holder of wisdom. I didn't have the conversation I had with her, with my mother. Yeah. So the important role they play in supporting the family when, my father, needed when we were away, and the role that actually now being lost and so much needed by the kids, the whole family. And so that's one of the myriad of experiences confirming then how the truth, which beyond the people decision, people is always missed.
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah. So actually, in summing up, all this environment, people, places, time, values, all this, how do you think they have added value to your soul purpose, your own life journey so far?
well, you know, I had a great curiosity and about seeing beyond events, the way they happen. And for instance, another incident, story, very interesting, which then reflecting upon it made me believe in the importance of the prenatal life and linked with our personality predisposition. My mom always told me that when she was pregnant with me, she loved sleeping, even advanced, on her belly, to feel my kicking as a sign of vitality, that I was fine, I was good. And, you know, normally mothers don't, because, and that, you know, I always linked that story to some dynamics, conflict, you know, dynamics we had. My mother, whenever I had to go back to Rome, you know, when I was studying clinical psychology in Rome, and I went back home to stay with my family, and then the night before, she always manifested separation anxiety with just provoking me in, you know, in simple, you know, and I wonder whether it was just a way of her, like when I was pregnant, she needed to, and, you know, I probably felt the restriction of the space, which was already small, and then whether, you know, contributed already to some reactive, you know, dynamics and or anxiety, separation anxiety, and me, you know, eager to come, you know, to be born and come to this world. Yes, that's something which actually made me reflect on many things. But there is an experience actually which also added a lot of value to actually what I was going to become later. I was 8, and we were having with us a cousin of my father's, the age of 17. My elder brother, had spent a holiday in Acilia near Rome, where my father also had studied. He lived with his grandparents for actually all the duration of his secondary school. He used to even cycle to Rome and sometimes seeing the bombs, because he was adolescent, dropping in, hitting Rome. So I was saying, sorry. So where is this kid, 17? So my father wanted to exchange, so to have him with us. And I remember I was on the balcony, and my father was having his afternoon nap before going back to work. And Fulvio was asking my father the key for the garage to go on a ride with my brother's motorbike. And my father, out of question, no way, because of the responsibilities, you know. And Fulvio insisted, no, the uncle, just one ride, I'll be back soon. I promise I'm back, I'm coming back soon. And I remember, and I don't know why I was so interested in this conversation. Remember, I was outside on the balcony and my father could hear the conversation, but why did I pay so much attention to that conversation? And my father, it's almost like I was building anxiety inside me. My father, no, you're not. In the end, even to have his nap, he gave the key. And so Fulvio went for a ride, and then I was still on the balcony, and I see these people, a young man, a kid had an accident, blah, blah, blah. And I just felt like, you know what I mean? The connection with my attention to the conversation, and he was dead. He had an accident, and my father, and what actually worried me, obviously, along with the loss of this young kid, was the worry about the mother, but the effect on my father's health. Because as an 8-year-old child, that was actually my greatest worry. The effect, and 8 years, I feeling that. So my father, so there was almost like a taboo about this. It was never really talked about it. Maybe he wanted to protect us. Maybe he removed the pain by not talking so much. But I knew he developed asthma, and I knew the link with this experience, because even if you know that it's not your fault, but you know the responsibility, my mother always believed that it was consequent to a shower, called the shower. So you see the interest in beyond the conventional truth and the manifest. So there, the value, I started being interested in the mind-body link, and in how our body somatizes the grief. If is not worked through and is not overcome, it sits in your body and it turns. And my father always said that, and obviously the anxiety built up in certain moment. I see his change, but no one could see. My mother always convinced that was the cold shower, because that is easier. But some people cannot handle the emotional impact and truth of things. But then the value, obviously, of the community, which is so in my work and one of the greatest focus on my work, the value of motherhood and fatherhood, motherhood, and the value of the family, even before, I set up my own family. But it was still there. My love of having children, my love of being a mother was still, years there, was already there beyond having my own family. The value of cooperation and interest in and respect for people coming from all sorts of backgrounds, which actually led me then to doing my study with different cultures and traveling and connecting with the indigenous mothers as well later on. And I think this I got very much from, my father, the respect, the openness to all people, and then the sense of adventure. My father always had this zest for life, this sense of fun and entertainment. He always took us to every summer, to the sea, making sure that we had 1 month, sunshine, holiday on the beach, and he traveled back to Potenza because he had to work, leaving my mother and the kids there. Before we had this house on the Roman coast, we used to go to, when I was 6, actually, we got this house, but then we were going to East Town near Naples, and all together with all the system, the kids, we went to, a day trip to, Ischia, another island, or the near beaches. Always, this sense of large family.
Yeah.
and togetherness.
Yeah.
So these are the main, values
Yeah.
came from the environment.
Very interesting childhood stories you have shared with
Yes, I have to say, with the traumas and losses, and but I have to say with strong foundations, if I have to say, and that helped me to look and the prenatal, perinatal, not just from the perspective of the traumatized people, but as you say, a larger number of people working in this field, they had the trauma, but and especially nowadays, it's all about trauma. You hear about trauma, and sometimes I think these poor parents are gonna think probably 10 times before conceiving a child, because social media, it's all about, trauma and creating, I think, a lot of anxiety in young couples. But I think we need also to talk about the power of nurturing experiences. And trauma is part of life, right? It's always there, right? This trauma and other trauma. But I think when there are strong foundations that help you also to transform the trauma into something meaningful for humanity.
Yes.
I experienced a traumatic experience when I was 25, and one day I will find the place to share with when I will feel ready. But not all trauma are resolved by talking.
Yes.
Some traumas are resolved through creativity, by creating something out of them, not necessarily sharing and talking, unless is the right time to do that, but through your work. And our work, we know very well, sometimes heals also traumas we had.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as we are aware of the trauma and we are not overwhelmed to the point to interfere our work, as long as we are aware and we can master and make something meaningful for humanity, that it's fine, So trauma is part of life, and and it's very subjective. It's never objective, unless it's a war, earthquake. But and then I experienced a major earthquake in the 80s, in Italy. I don't know if you remember, and I was 14, and that was another. I was at the cinema with my friends, and I actually don't have a memory. My system shut down. I don't actually, my senses were blocked, and it was a defense mechanism not to make me feel the shaking, which was,
Yes.
Huge. And then going out and see all the, the pieces of the buildings on the ground, and someone under, just dead, a young person, all these, historical, societal, natural disaster, trauma and anxiety of my parents, if they were safe, and my brothers, and this powerful emotion that your system sometimes is not prepared to deal with, because you don't have a reference experience. And but then again, you feel that inside you there are rocks, and there is a cocoon you can always go back, and protecting you, that is inside yourself. Horrific images. I mean, all the town, the cinemas, all the life and Potenza was in the old part of it. We couldn't even walk. All the part of the buildings, destroyed, and this square clock stopped at the time of the major seismic, shake, and then carry on for months. The assessment, shaking continued at night, going to bed with anxiety that it could happen again. I mean, no study has been done about the effects of pregnant women. It always been in my mind to do it, but can you imagine, going to bed with anxiety that your bed can shake? And fortunately, our building was a modern one, strong, and just a few lesions, but nothing major. But imagine that anxiety that stayed with you for a long, long time until, everything. It has continued for 2 years, probably more, longer. So,
yeah.
Yes.
So if we come to who you started to become after you were born, what were the earliest traits that guided you in the direction you later took on in life? Of course, you talked to us about your decisions, major decisions that you made at the bifurcation points, your choice, no law, psychology, or the information, communication of information of what is important that you have been receiving from even before conception. But when did you discover that, yes, that's what I want to explore in my life? That's what I want to be, to become?
Yeah, well, I always been interested, even before, university. I always been interested in humans, in people, in health. I didn't know whether from the medical point of view, whether, study medicine or psychology, but I always had this drive to understand. I remember when I was really young and I watched television, and I saw people talking, and I said, how is that people talk? Where does it originate? How does the brain do that? Questioning, always questioning, and seeking the truth. I remember when I was teenager, and most kids lied to their parents to go somewhere. The parents didn't agree. And I didn't like that. I prefer to fight. And, even having argument and I demanding my parents, my father's reasoning about not wanting me to go somewhere, because obviously, teenagers never see the risk or the danger. They just, omnipotent, and they want to. But I wanted to, to understand, always understand. And obviously there was this curiosity, this drive that made me, for instance, end a loving relationship with someone from Potenza when I was from the age of 25 to 29, because I knew that there was another love that I had to follow. And that was a very important love, relationship. And actually this Olympic athlete died of COVID. And so a major loss also for me, because, great love stays in your heart. They never go. But, I had, and I think this drive was already evident when I was a kid. And I also, another thing, I remember a friend from my adolescence, whose parents had divorced. And, one of the first couples divorcing in the south of Italy in those days was like a scandal. And, provincial towns are great for community support for kids, really great. But there's also discrimination about people, those who do things for the first time. And every, lots of kids tend to marginalize, this girl. And I was always close to the weaker, to the, those in need. And it's amazing because I see this tendency in my elder daughter, always going towards, those who, show some difficulties or, mental challenges. And while, most kids would, because it's a tendency of adolescent, to be in a group and to discriminate. So I think I manifested very early, but I always was surrounded by friends, minimum friends, and play in the courtyard. And this sense of community and interest in my research, focus on community remained and, directed me in late life and made me, more interested in cooperation than competition. If I had wanted to get a secure job, because in the south of Italy, you get a secure job and you stay in the same job all your life. So I did actually something a little bit against my, my father would have loved to see me, settled in Rome where I was studying. Then when I moved, I went to London because I was the beneficiary of a grant for research project. And he saw me always going, always, obviously, not like a gypsy. I always caught the opportunity to go. I didn't want that. I didn't want that, the security. For me, it was not the security. I had to follow my passion, my drive, and follow the synchronism of life. What actually life, the window it opened, and you will see how the synchronisms led me in the end to Australia, and the importance of following the flow of life and see the connection. Because if you don't see it, then you opt for the comfortable zone, and where you stay all your life. And my brother lived in their town, all their life, happily with their family, and different decision. And it's going good for me to go back and see their family there, my family there, instead of being spread, in other countries. So it's very nice for me to have that and, going back.
Yeah, very typical example, Antonella, of creative people. This is what you describe, how creative people make their choices in their life. But can you bring us a little bit more about the inspirational people or non-humans you have met in your life, and who could make or you see them as milestones along your way?
Oh, many, many, many. Well, I think first within my family, my father, my grandmother, I think I was already inspired by, these people. Then I had an uncle. And I think, yes, I always see in some people a source of learning for me. And my mother for other things, obviously. But let's, first of all, I was lucky to go to, a nursery school, preschool, I mentioned earlier, run by nuns. But what I remember of those years is not the religious teaching. I don't remember religious teaching at all. It was the warmth. And I still remember the name, Suora, Sister Franca, and Sister Maria. The warmth and the love they dealt, with kids. And those were great inspiration for me. I remember that when we played at the playground outdoor, the sounds of the swallows announcing spring coming from Africa. They always told, oh, these birds have flown the long way from Africa. So it was March, April, announcing the spring, and we were outside. And and we were already cultivating art, music. So as I said, I remember the warmth, and that's why, I'm so upset when I see the impersonal relationships that actually this school system, education system now offer these kids. So it was everything very personal, very. And then I went to a primary school not far from where we lived, full time. So I stayed there from the age of 7 because I did my first year in the town with my mother. So from the age of 7 to 11, I was a full time from morning to 5 o'clock. And we did all sorts of subjects, music, art. I remember one of my paintings exhibited at the art exhibition. So, there was a brilliant appreciation of the potential in each individual child. There was a cultivation. We did technology and design. We did sport activities, athletics, swimming. And it was public. It was not a private school. It was public. And we had all the best service. And we did English, even English. I still remember the name of my teacher, Bianca Marchese. We kept visiting her over time for years. Then I don't have strong memory of my middle, then we have 3 years intermediate school, middle school, and then we have 5 years of high school. I chose high scientific school. Then, there's a high humanistic school in Italy. You can choose. In those days, there were only humanistic high school and high scientific school, and then there were technical school. And I developed, I think, an integrative mindset, because although the high school was scientific, but we studied Latin, we studied Italian, art, and this teacher let the particularly gifted children, for art, cultivating painting or particular technique. And now couldn't be possible. And we did, so that gave me the opportunity to develop a quite integrative, interdisciplinary mindset, but it was really the beginning. Then I went to university, and this professor was the very first really inspirational figure who really gave me the imprint. And thanks to him, I actually ended up in London. He was he's still alive, and he was a doctor, medical doctor, who then decided to teach psychophysiology and clinical psychophysiology. And he used, imagine, now it's all online. After the lessons, we used to gather in his room. So a group of people, and talking about all sort of related topics, asking him questions and developing insights, discussing about the insights. And he already noticed my interest in obstetrics. So I was 19, in the first year of university, I was already doing some, pieces of research on pregnancy, and I was already interested in that. And he let me cultivate that. And then he ran seminars on postural rehabilitation with the music. So he focused on the importance of the posture as and muscular tension as an accumulation, absorption of psychological tension, emotional tension. And obviously, highlighting the importance of looking at this tension during in the therapeutic session and the body language. So you see, all my future work has been really is rooted in this early work. And we used to have lunch and coffee at the nearby, just outside the university bar, restaurant, and discussing of, this really, that doesn't exist anymore. And so this mind-body link was really, I got from, it's rooted much further back, but it was consolidated by this degree course where, my thesis, I prepared my thesis with this supervision, my research, experimental thesis, and he helped me prepare the research proposal, which was approved by the Leonardo da Vinci Fellowship. And I was working with him at university, as a collaborator. And I was already 30 when I remember him coming during a seminar and announcing that I had been granted this sort of fellowship, and I was, I was going to go to London, and I had lived in Rome only for 1 year. Then after him,
remember the name? Do you remember? Can you share?
Professor Ruggero Vezio Ruggeri. And, his work is very much in line with Stephen Porges, all these very famous American, but as most Italian, his work, apart from some articles published in English, remain very much confined within the Italian, boundaries. And he retired from teaching a few years ago, and he set up a school of theatre and master in theatre, art therapy, drama therapy. And I remember when I was studying in university, we used to play Shakespeare, because he believed that by acting the character in Shakespeare's plays, we could understand the emotions and the human psychology, because there is a lot in Shakespeare's character about to learn. So we learn not just from the theory, we learn from practices. So we did the self-practice on our posture, the effect, the mediation of the music, and you see my interest in the music when I was pregnant, and the music I used as a mediation. And then that project took me to London. And this is another amazing story. One of the first books, actually the very first book I had read on water birth, was by Yehudi Gordon and Janet Balaskas, who are pioneer of active birth in UK. Yehudi Gordon is actually from Johannesburg, originally from South Africa, and he went to London to work. I think he studied in South Africa to become a medical doctor. And when I got this grant for this project, I needed, one of the conditions was to find an enterprise, a hospital in my case, because I wanted to, the research was on pregnant mothers and the relationship with the body image. So I had to find a hospital. So I contacted two public hospitals, which turned me down because too much bureaucracy, especially in UK, in London, they would have never, too much. So they said, and then there was a private hospital, St. John's and Elizabeth Hospital. And I remember I was living in Rome, and I called this hospital. No one answered. There was the answering machine. I left my message on the answering machine, with my English, still scholastic English, but I managed making myself be understood. And I then went out, I came back, and there was a message, you know, all the answering machines, and I was there. And there was this consultant obstetrician of this hospital saying that he was interested, he wanted to speak with me. And I called, he left the number, and I called. And it turned out to be Yehudi Gordon, the author of the first book in Italian, I still have, I had read. Yes. And he said to me, look, you know, I would be very interested in taken you on board, but I need to see you. I need to see you. And I said, oh my God, so now I have to travel, I have to there without any guarantee that then I'm going to, you know, carry out this project there. I went there, all African books, African, you know, his wife was not there. I was in this big house. He offered me the room to stay. And I was like, you know, it was the first time. And I said, I remember there was not even a lock in the bedroom, in my bedroom. I said, I'm going to, you know, your first experience. And it was London, everything felt so overwhelming. I said, he said, okay, tomorrow you have breakfast. And he liked me immediately because the ideas, you know, and, you know, Jew people, very curious, very inquisitive. And he saw the potential in my project. So he said that I'm leaving very early because I've, you know, I have to deliver, help women, you know, giving birth. But you can come, you know, you can either walk or take the bus. I can't remember now. He left. There will be breakfast, the cereal for you, everything. I don't know where his wife was, but I was very curious in the morning. I remember looking at the books, African books and African furnitures. And I went there and he showed me the birth unit, this wonderful Eden for women, unfortunately private, because I think if all public hospitals were like this. He instructed me, showed me the programs, prenatal, postnatal classes, yoga classes run by Janet Balasquez. And, you know, the percentage of cesarean section was like something 1%, 2%, you know, all. And then he said, okay, I would really love to take you on board. I will send via fax the letter to Professor Ruggero Vezio when you arrive. And I don't know why, but I said, so I don't have, I was thinking, oh, but are you sure you're going to send it? Because I was so willing, you know, to work there, to do this project. She said, yes, you arrive, you will find, I wanted something at that moment, you know, said, trust me, you will get there. And that's how it was. And that was the beginning of my understanding about the synchronism in life. Because I said, how is that possible? I mean, 3 hospitals, just at random. I just picked them out at random. I didn't even know that the birth unit, this one was private. And then the second man that was supposed to last 6 months, and he extended it to first 1.5 years. Because then, you know, it turned to be also an observational study. I needed to do follow-ups. And this experience, and obviously I got a lot of inspiration by Yehudi because he was my supervisor and he was extremely, as an obstetrician, you understand, he was very interested in the psychological aspect of pregnant mothers. And so it was extremely inspiring for me. And it was always, I was going, you know, into his office and he always entertained in conversation, telling him my feedback, you can imagine, with all the passion of the very beginning. I was writing already my first book, Mothers, Babies and Their Body Language, and I discovered, you know, this entire incredibly rich world, which is in the interaction between mothers and babies. And but my focus went very much at the beginning in the perinatal period. Then when Yehudi extended my placement, I had the opportunity to listen to mothers' birth experiences, to their stories, taking me back to their prenatal period. For instance, there was a case that I described in my second book, working with parents and infants and mind-body perspective, integrative perspective, where even the voice, the screaming voice of the mother in labor, because obviously I attended also some labor and birth, the screaming, instead of deep sound connecting with the baby, going down, the screaming, more a sign of anxiety and fear. So I started studying the quality of the sounds during labor and taking me back to this early childhood of this woman, the early childhood of this woman, but also her experience of pregnancy. Now, I'm not telling you the details because it's a long story, and the development of mastitis, which prevented her from connecting with the baby, because the connection with the baby, the physical connection, created too much anxiety over her early childhood. And, this case is described in detail in my second book. So everything was bringing me to the prenatal period, and that's where my interest, into the prenatal, in the links with the perinatal period, developed, and increasingly then later on. And then I was inspired by Michel Odon, because Michel Odon was in the same team. So I was attending his seminars, workshop in his house in London. I was really privileged, I have to say. But the greatest inspirations came from the mothers and babies and fathers, because then I attended these prenatal and perinatal classes with fathers as well. So listening to the father's experience, with Yehudi was leading some of this. So, and I started really having great admiration of Yehudi for his work, not just a conventional obstetrician, but, as a, psychologist as well, running classes, to support classes. And then Peter Walker, the pioneer of baby massage in UK. So I got the qualification for him to teach baby massage, and I was teaching, and I saw the co-regulating effect of infant massage, mother and baby, the calming effect, mainly the physiological and psychological effect. Anyway, an entire world of discoveries. And then there was the therapist there, midwife as well. And I also learned to work in a team, because, I was working with midwives, with the therapist, with a psychotherapist, and then another psychotherapist, and then Yehudi, and then the pediatrician coming if the baby had, in those very seldom cases of oxygen needed, the pediatrician. So it was wonderful. And it was, my first experience in London. I was there like a child, curious about everything, literally everything. So I was reconnected with my childhood, and that allowed me to connect. But I also saw the babies as a great source of inspiration, great teachers. And I was witnessing this dance between mother and baby that you didn't find in the psychology text. You found a lot of theory, and I started also becoming very interested in the importance of observation. Okay, more than relying on books, which are still important, of course, because books are, when they are, also based on practitioners' experience. So, but sometimes when they are purely theoretical, they don't actually see the actual babies, and all the resources that babies has, really to teach us if we listen to them. And then other discoveries later on, with my indigenous studies. But that was, when I was writing my first book, and I had to write everything. Everything had to be, that's another thing I had also as an adolescent, putting everything into writing that could stay as a document, as something, for I don't know who, for maybe my daughter, my children one day, but I had this drive. And other inspirational people then later on, I was very much inspired by Ray Castellino, who actually did run a workshop. Yehudi knew Ray Castellino. He ran a workshop at the birth unit. And I just was inspired by his very empirical approach, very more than theoretical. And I follow his workshop also in Berkeley. During one of the APAS Congress. And so we really had a real experience with babies. And I found a lot of his work resonating with mine. Then it was also the time of my experiences, my first experiences with ISPPM, the International Society of Prenatal and Perinatal Psychology and Medicine. And I met Ludwig Janus, and we actually developed a very nice friendship. And I invited me to present the outcome of my research at the birth unit at a conference in Sardinia. The first conference, actually, I presented, my work in 2002, so quite a long time ago in Sardinia. And in Sardinia, I met again Lucio Zichella, which actually I forgot to mention as one of the inspiration, because after my degree in clinical psychology, I did a 1-year post degree training, which is compulsory to then become, a doctor in clinical psychology at his department of gynecology and obstetrics. I mean, Lucio Zichella is very well known within the ISPPM because of this interest in the pregnant mothers' experience, not just as an obstetricians and gynecologists conventional one. So my work was supervised by him and the professor. I can't remember. Not professor, was a psychotherapist there. Can't remember his name at this moment. It doesn't matter. And I was actually. I was more an assistant in the counseling of a teenager interrupting their pregnancy. So quite intense experience, first time experience, as a poster. So lots of, because then we discussed our experience with psychotherapists. So it was a huge, another very, very, full of revelations, because it's such a hard decision, these girls, and to work with them, what is the best decision also psychologically. So yeah, I would just say that also Lucio Zichella has been, another inspiring figure. But then I have, Olga, I always said, and you always been, an inspirational figure for me, because we have known each other for how long? A very long time. And your tenacity, your passion, your determination, and, you experience huge challenges also, the first years. We all experience that, but your determination and your perseverance it's always been, an inspiration for all of us. So, I mean, the list is long, and I think when you are open to learn from each single person you encounter in your life, and from any opportunity, any event, even a meeting, just open to learn. Then you see the connections, you see the links, and there are more and more links than in my life with, meeting David and etc. But I mean, carry on with the questions, otherwise we end up running out of time.
Yes, my dear. So I think that it is now time to ask you your main findings. All these beautifully rich experience, encounters, travels, Gandhi's observation, etc. What would you say are the most important findings?
Right. Many actually of the findings have come from the inspiration from my children. And let's go to the conception of my children, because, and this is another amazing revelation. I met Yehudi again at the launch of my first book, which meanwhile, I had already met David. Okay, so I met David in a tango venue because I was dancing tango. Dancing has been another passion of mine. And he was there to take photos. And I saw this guy with the red cheeks, and I had an immediate feeling that he was coming from a remote area. I was not interested in this, men, rich, that many women aim at. I always been romantic and, passionate. And I see this very in the corner, taking photos because it's passion, red cheeks, looking more like, brought up in a farm and coming from a remote part of the world. That was my feeling. And then actually I turned to be right. And it was, again, love at first sight. After a short while, he was talking about, marry me. And I was a little bit more writing me letters. I said, that's quite strange. So I wanted to be a little bit more prudent. But I just trusted him. I just felt that I had to go for it. And when we got married a year later in Potenza on the coast, the Calabria coast, and we wanted to have a child, both. But I had never had a uterus scan. No, never, sorry, but for a long, long time. I was 37, so I thought maybe so that we know, that everything is okay, everything is healthy, and maybe we don't waste the time, because I was already 37. So I was thinking, even if we want to have 2 children, I can have a breath. I don't have to, which I wouldn't have liked. So I wanted to be sure, just because I knew that I was healthy, but I just wanted to have. So at the launch of my first book, we met, there was Yehudi, and Yehudi said, look, why don't you come to my clinic? And you do a scan, we check the ovulation. And we did. And so I was in the toilet of the center. And I was wearing my father's had already passed away, by the way. And I don't want to tell you about his death, because otherwise we would really go over the time. It opens another chapter. So at the moment, for now, I leave it aside. And I was wearing his quite valuable watch, valuable from the affective, point of view. And also, so I used to wear it very seldom, especially in London, in a big city. But I wanted to wear it that day. I was in the toilet and I was timing the ovulation with ovulation test. And while timing it, because I had already had my first scan, then it was the second scan where we had already tried to conceive. So to see if, we had, the baby was already there. it would have been just a likelihood, because it would have been if the ovulation was working. And while I was timing, the watch stopped. The arrow stopped. And I found it a little bit strange, because this watch had always worked and I seldom wore it. I said, well, maybe the batteries run out. And I said, but why now? Yeah, it stopped just when the sign indicated that there was, I can't remember exactly, that anyway, I had conceived. So there was no more ovulation. That watch started working at 4 o'clock, 3 hours later again. So the batteries were fine. And what happened is that when I went for the third scan, the technician, very skilled technician, said that from the lining of the womb, I can see a pregnancy, but it's only likely because it's too early to see it. But from the thickening of the lining, I can see. So actually what I felt, I interpreted that the ovulation had stopped because actually there was a baby there. Or there was already an embryo. And from then I became interested in something beyond, in spirituality. Up to then I was quite not skeptical, but saying, oh well, I don't know, but since that incident, I really started believing in synchronism, which is the theory of synchronism by Jung, that there is a force of an energy of movement in what happened, which makes event connects, and this is not chance, but it's something beyond that, and I became, and then, of course, there was a baby there, so we conceived, and, I was 37, and I was 38. I met David at 37. I was 38 when we conceived, just straight away. And then I gave, I fell in love with this pregnancy, literally, and I started setting up, because I was not in a job. I just wanted to enjoy fully this pregnancy, and I wanted to explore the link between the baby's behavior with the music, piano music I was listening to, especially from the 4th, 5th months, because, the year, the development complete. And although I knew that the babies, can already sense the vibration, even if the year is not fully developed. So I started this huge observation and communication, and I was connected with nature. And I remember lying on the grass with David in Richmond Park and feeling the movement of the baby with the sounds of the birds and the background, lots of connection, how the baby's movement were changing over time with exposure to music. So as she became more and more accustomed to the music, the same. There was a range of something like 10 pieces of music. I changed them. But the time I used to expose her to the music and myself was almost the same. So in the end, there was like an anticipation. She knew that I was gonna, from my intention, that I was gonna listen to the music. And she sent me some cues with her movements. Now, these movements are never objective. They are interpreted by the mother. And for me, and I was aware that I was actually coming to some amazing findings. And I had to write about these findings. So I was writing it. The writing itself was elevating my sense of consciousness because, you know, when you write, there is like a reflection, a mirroring. And this relationship with this baby was developing. And she knew me, we knew each other, and I could recognize the movement. For instance, David took me to the screening of a film, a documentary in 3 dimension. And, you know, 3 dimension can be very disturbing at the beginning because if you're not used to, especially some scenes, and I could just, you know, she sent me messages that she was not comfortable because I was not comfortable. I found that some movement in 3 dimension disturbing, uncomfortable. She was, so, you know, and this inspired obviously my research focus on the importance of the relationship and the window of opportunity of pregnancy, the extreme window of opportunities, because when I went into labor, and then the involvement of David, I always engaged David in touching my abdomen, noticing her movement, and he was making sounds of animals, you know. And in labor, I was, that's another very important findings that was actually, that I discovered with the birth, the first birth. And that during labor, I was giving birth at home from home ward of St. Thomas's Hospital in London. So midwife led. And because obviously all my experience at the birth unit with the active birth, so I had the knowledge with experience with other women, pregnant women. So I had treasured from that experience. So I was walking and breathing, and that helped me a lot. Working with the breath through the contraction, dilating 1 centimeter every hour, which was wonderful, but really very regular. And what happened is that in the final phase, the pushing phase, what they call the pushing phase, they found a little bit of meconium, tiny bit. But because of the hospital obsession with safety, and they transferred me from the home from home to the hospital, to the medical ward, because they had to start monitoring me. So they tied me on my knee by a bed with this thing, and I felt immediately in my body this sense of constrictions. I couldn't walk anymore. The contractions were not powerful anymore. The process had been disturbed. The process I was trusting so much because of this relationship developed from conception, where, you know, I had been disturbed, and I could feel the baby. I felt the baby stuck. She couldn't benefit from the movement. The contraction started becoming irregular, not so powerful, because in that position, the midwife's telling me, push as if you were in the toilet. And those words were just, I didn't want to hear those words. All I wanted to hear. The obstetrician came and said that if you don't deliver within 1.5 hours, we have to intervene. And, you know, more and more insight about the system. I mean, how can you say such a thing to a woman who is in labor? I mean, fortunately, I had my core coming from yoga, meditation, very central and strong. But a woman who didn't have that would have panicked, would have been as it happened. And then I understood actually what happened in hospital. Even in the, let's say, less medically complicated, in the least medically complicated labor, there is always something to interfere. At that moment, what saved me was my inside voice saying, you are not going to intervene. I trust my baby. I didn't say that, but the inside me. So in the end, and then it's funny because I wanted to deliver on all fours in an active way. But in the end, the only thing I listened is that the obstetrician, the midwife said, look, you are very tired, of course, because of the monitor. And then you know the sound of the monitoring machine, beep, beep, this metal sound. So the only thing that I gave in, and because I was very tired, said, look, why are you so reluctant to give birth, lie down? Because, you know, I was very fit and I wanted to just give birth, you know, using the force of gravity. Said, just sometimes it may work because you're tired and maybe the pelvic will open. And I know that I would have delivered on all fours on the floor, but I was very, very tired because of the disturbed process. I went on the birthing, you know, they use this bed or whatever. And Giselle, I gave birth, you know, no intervention, nothing, because I relied on this communication, on the breathing, and I kept trusting the process, although but not all women have this, you know, experience. And that's how actually a labor can be interrupted, can be altered, and birth. And that was a finding, obviously, of huge importance, which was confirmed then from my findings with the indigenous, you know, my study of the indigenous women. What happened with Sahara confirmed even more this, because with Sahara is a different story. Of course, Giselle was and then another thing, Giselle was born screaming, so that tiny quantity of meconium was actually not dangerous at all. But the risk of the monitoring machine, which actually documented in studies, outgrow the risk of the tiny presence of meconium. Because in fact, she was born crying, all her lungs, because there is a worry that she could swallow, the baby could swallow the baby. So you see, so imagine how many cases a day are altered labor, you know, and because of this. I'm not talking about the cases where intervention can save the life of mother and baby, but how many cases are altered because of this obsession of safety, which actually undermine the sense of safety of the mother, which is the most important aspect. With Sahara, and other important findings, which actually I haven't written an article yet, but is one of my next article, and actually I invite a birth professional to invest on research in this particular aspect. With Sahara was the opposite. And then, you know, the regular labor reflected Giselle's personality. Giselle always been a very regular sleep pattern, regular, prudent child, very reflexive from very early on, very imaginative. Of course, all the stimuli I exposed her during pregnancy, I can see the links with her personality, many, many links. Her musicality, her sense of rhythm, her, for instance, early language, verbal language. At 3, she was writing her name, but then these early drawings of musical notes, you know, all early drawings which I kept as a treasure, all musical notes. And I never taught. She told me that then her nanny, which I had for a few hours at the beginning, taught her a musical note, but actually what acquired meanings was actually this colorful, which I interpret as a little bit like a life in the womb. And then a finding about that is that we will never understand the meaning of prenatal memory, what prenatal memory, if we don't see beyond the manifest. If we rely, children will never tell you about the prenatal memory with language, with words. They will tell you with their behavior, their drawings, their non-verbal behavior with their body, because their stories is written in their body. So that was a huge revelation for me. I knew about prenatal memory, and I saw obviously the links through my work at the birth unit, but this was the most vivid because it's your child that you see every day, every moment. And then the way she was dancing when she set up, 6 months, 4 months, she started sitting up, and she was then, I'm dancing like in the womb. Or things like, do you remember, Giselle, about your time in my belly, mommy's belly? And she said, I was dancing. She didn't say I was listening to music, I was dancing, because that's what the embodied memory was, of moving her body in response to the music. And then, this awareness, she had a very young, I remember she was 2 years, I was feeling the bath in my mom's apartment, and she, out of the blue, she said, Mommy, I'm happy. And obviously me, always curious, and why are you happy? Because you are here with me. And she was 2. And I said, oh, this awareness already of her state that was related to my presence, and their awareness of her happiness. I'm happy. Yes. And then the Sahara, the major findings with Sahara is that Sahara's labor was very different, it was irregular. And so after, I always went to the hospital when I was already dilated, advanced. I stayed home as long as I could. But when I went with Sahara, same hospital, actually, coincidentally, same midwife on shift. And they said to me, look, because the contractions are irregular and you're getting tired, if we break the water, with the needle, they break the water, it will speed up and you will deliver quickly. Then, although I felt very confident, but I was not at the level of knowledge where to say, no, you're not breaking the water. You're not disturbing.
Yes.
I didn't have that, I didn't even have that level of knowledge to say I want to have a home birth, which I would have had even 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's a process.
Yes.
I was not there. I was in a very good zone, a good, position. And I signed because I said, and David again, who had missed Giselle's birth because he went to visit my mom in the other room. She was on her own. She didn't want, my mom a bit anxious, very sensitive. She didn't want to be there. And at that time, he thought, David, okay, this pushing phase is lasting quite a long time. I'm going to visit your mother. And actually, when he came, Giselle was already out. She missed also Sahara's birth because they said, that was 4 o'clock when they broke the water. They said, look, by 8 o'clock, it's all about time. And by 8 o'clock, you will have delivered. So David thought, I'm going to go to the supermarket to have a sandwich. And 6 o'clock, the baby was out after a wild delivery on all fours, like an animal, which actually that's what, I would love to have, but very fast. And Sahara, for some time, had a very reactive response to anything disturbing her. And for many years, and I always interpreted as that, disturbing, having a process disturbed. And that became interesting in neurodiversity. Okay, now there is a lot about neurodiversity of children affected by hyperactivity, attention deficit disorder. Because why do we have to label these children? They just have So why not to acknowledge the baby's neurodiversity already in labor? Where is it written that the contraction should be regular? So you see, it's all a product, an overconstruct of the system. So if I had even 10 years ago, I would have said, no, you're not breaking the door. The baby is dictating. And in fact, so Giselle, the same thing. Giselle, for the first 4 years of her life, had like a small, similar to a panic attack. Whenever we played a talking doll, those any electronic toy. It was only actually later on, after years, that I linked that to the monitoring machine. Because I think, where does this come of? I mean, she didn't have a trauma. She didn't experience, a trauma which could make me think, as far as I know, explain. But then I said, yes, that was a trauma for the baby. And the hospital doesn't see this, again, beyond the manifest. This subtle reality, underneath reality, which is very strong in birth and, birth trauma, etc. One would say, oh, when I told talked to a practitioner saying, oh, but both babies were born, naturally. Of course, but the baby's sensitivity is so fine that anything that is not trauma for us can be a trauma for this little one who has the labor interrupted. So I understand, the hospital will always interfere in most cases, unless the pregnant mother happened to be with a very, with an obstetrician or midwife, especially obstetrician, because those are the ones that need it most, awareness of what is beyond, why the baby is very sensitive to tiny things. And obviously that made me aware of the importance of training birth professionals, to sensitize them to the importance of a humane approach, listening, observing, watching, giving time, not rushing, not giving time, because all the mother needs during labor is not being rushed. Breaking the waters, let's speed up because the hospital has to get rid of you. You can go home. If you deliver in England by 12, then you can go home the same day. If it's 10 plus 12, then you have to stay overnight. So it's better to speed up. And the effect on the baby, so, Sahara, I saw the link with her personality, at least the first year, because then by talking about this experience and making her aware, and obviously in the maturation, the growing, obviously they learn to overcome certain things, but noticing the links make you understand how, the gaps of the system, that the obstetricians, birth professionals don't study. And then obviously when I had the experience with the Himba, other huge revelations confirming this, that their women, it's a matter of default to give birth. They sit on a rock. If they just happen to be in the field, then they sit on a rock and they give birth. And easy. I mean, I wouldn't say easy. It's just because what is easy? It's all relative. In our culture, births become complicated. So I wouldn't say easy, but an awareness of the normality of pain. That pain is a physiological, is a cue that nature has provided the mother with, so that she can work, as she can receive the cues from the baby. And the baby is a leader, is a conductor, is participant in the labor process. It sends cues and needs to be listened to, while there is an imposition of the medical system, the hospital needs, and not the mother needs, right? And so when okay, I met, my husband who was born and grew up in Africa, and has been also an inspirational figure in my life. No matter the conflicts, we always have relationship challenges, but I have to say that through him, an entire world is open up, and especially the indigenous, the ancient roots of Africa. And one of the main discovery I made when I lived with the kids as well, that when the mother is supported by the community, everything flows. The mother never gets stressed, because even if she probably has an outburst or a moment of tiredness, there is always someone picking up the child and helping, noticing. They're very radar. When we arrived, these kids welcome us, walk towards us. The youngest was 14 months, shaking our hands with a bow, 14 months. And I have photos all documented, presenting conferences. And, the older looking after the younger. So, these kids always exposed to and developing with extremely sensorial skills, sensory motor skills, not intellectualized, like, all in the head, like in our society. They are very curious. And I started wondering, where does this discipline come? These kids don't go to school. So this discipline, where does it come? This morality that they have innate, not crossing the boundaries, very curious, but not crossing, respect for others and us as foreigners. And then I realized that these epigenetics provide the answer, because the way these good practices, prenatal, preconception, are passed on through generations via the grandparents, and they become ingrained in the system, and they become a matter of routine. So, we know about the epigenetic effect of trauma, but this community offer a wonderful setting to watch the epigenetic, the intergenerational transmission, and how this is embodied in their system. So when you say you see this particular tribe is called the Himba, holding their children, moving their child with such agility, and then you have a vivid experience that their psychology, their emotion talks through the body, through the gestures, through the movement, and that is conveyed directly to the baby. So the way they hold, and then you see these young girls carrying toddlers, so already equipped when they become pregnant, witnessing breastfeeding, they already know how to do it. Our, modern mothers sometimes never seen a baby, never seen a child, never seen another woman breastfeeding. So no wonder why, they are overwhelmed, they may be overwhelmed by the experience. So another major finding is that from this experience is that this community live in a mindful way. So I realized that actually mindfulness doesn't originate in the Eastern country, but in all ancient cultures. And then I deepened my studies about mindfulness, and I found that from the scientific point of view, and then I did the course to teach mindfulness, the 1-year teaching course with 5 retreats in Devon in England. And so through the experience, experience, and then the experience with the Himba, I realized that actually these people develop all the abilities that the practice of mindfulness foster. So empathy. So these kids are naturally very empathic, compassion. They realize that actually we evolved to be compassionate beings. We don't go to school. They don't need to go to school to learn about what compassion. Our schools don't teach. But they're not theoretical teaching. They're just passed on. They witness in the gesture, and then attunement, and one of the mothers was talking, in the end, she was questioning me. And before the translator, I wrote an entire chapter about this. Before the translator translated for us, she had already understood because of the connection, because I was there interested in their culture. I was not there like a tourist taking photos, as sometimes happen, although they live in a remote area, but the people on safari stay in a lodge even 40 kilometers from there, you know, go and visit and to take pictures. I was there interested in their culture, and then they saw me as a mother with kids. So that connecting and that this human connection opened this mother to share their experience. And we understood each other, just, you know, anticipating what actually the translator was. So that's why I got interested in mindfulness. I said, if we lived in a more mindful way, which means slowing down, no rushing, being present. You know, babies don't know about the future. They don't have anxiety about the future. Or yes, they might have anxiety about their past experience, but in their body, is stored in their body, but they need the present to have their needs understood and met through the father's response. They need the mother to be present and listen. Otherwise, if she is worried, preoccupied about work, about this, stressed and depressed and anxious, that takes her away from connecting with the baby. So other quality that, you know, the practice of mindfulness foster is breathing awareness and, you know, seeing the connection. These indigenous people, there is no separation between life and death. It's all a circle. So death opens the door to another life. So when they are in a moment, time of crisis, they connect with ancestors. So the ancestor comes back to life through the baby. So the baby brings all the wisdom, and it's the same. This is what actually epigenetics and quantum physics says. You know, the baby is already got the DNA of the ancestor. So we talk the same language. Indigenous people intuitively have known for millennia what actually now is the focus of science, research, the value of the community, the importance of compassion, self-compassion. And then when you see, you know, live with these people, you realize that actually they know. They know that by connecting with the soul of the child before conception, they make their fertility, you know, higher. And they simulated the dances they do. I have a video of these primitive, very primal dances they do when they realize that they have conceived their baby. And they sing the same song, they practice the same dances to create an element of continuum so the baby can recognize. But this happened before conception. And, you know, when I conceived my children, which was before this study, because they were also Giselle and Sarah, this was in 2014 when we went to Namibia. And what happened is that before conceiving, before even meeting David, I had started painting all, you know, on motherhood and conception, and you have seen some of the, you know, my painting. That was even before. So there was actually, I was in that way creating through painting of the topics, preconception. I was creating an energy field through these practices. And then when we actually had the act of intercourse to conceive, I remember meditating. I was speaking to the soul of the baby to make, you know, I visualized it. And that's what I teach the mothers. And even in, you know, in this, one of the studies of my PhD, I'm putting my personal experience, the experience of the Himba, which I developed in a rationale for my PhD. So the importance of these ancient practices, because maybe they are the key. Maybe we know that they are the key. And that was another finding, which actually made me understand, a lot again, and confirming actually my insight about the system. Is one of my supervisors coming to me and say, look, we need to write an article for this magazine, university magazine, also to attract, participants for your research. And but they want something, catching, and they, because I spoke with the journalist, and wondering how, not having had a traumatic birth, a traumatic experience, you work in this field. And that was really like, writing. He wrote, because he wrote a draft, and then obviously I changed, I work on the draft and changing wording. And he wrote, Antonella's story of pregnancy and motherhood is not typical. And I was saying, no, but that's what our society think is becoming natural, and nurturing, whatever you call it, undisturbed birth, almost something atypical. You need to have a home birth to have it guaranteed. You don't know, if you go to the hospital, you don't have this guaranteed. And it's very, very dramatic. And I corrected. I said, I added, if we refer to the Western modern world and obstetric practices. But it's not typical. Women have delivered, have nurtured their pregnancy, their relationship with the baby for thousands and thousands of years, for 99.9% of our humanity. What is changing very quickly is creating huge mental issues, because the body hasn't got the time, and will never have the time to adjust to these changes. The physiology won't. If women will end up giving birth only via cesarean, there will be changes in the speeches.
Yes.
It's like some people say, but humans are extremely adapting, very resilient. No. They apparently are, but then there is a price, which is, mental issues. And we know what's going on in the world. And all these people, dictators and war promoters, and they all had, unresolved traumas. Now, I'm not saying that all people who had unresolved traumas end up being a criminal, or may end up being, starting a war, but they are more likely, they have more chances of, once they get the power, to lose their control in front of conflicts, with other countries, and just start a war. But there is no way, there isn't been a case in the history of someone who had the nurturing experiences with trauma, because trauma is always there, but ordinary traumas of life, who end up being a criminal, or they can still end up having problems in life, because human development is very complex. Even nurturing experience are never a guarantee, because it's not about that. There are also other experiences. Your early experiences build up foundations, they reduce the chances, they equip you with tools to enable you to cope with subsequent challenges. But still, there is no guarantee that, you're not going to turn into a criminal, or you may still have depression, you may still have mental disorders, because life circumstances can be not in control. So, the prenatal period, the perinatal, prenatal, is a huge window of opportunities. And when you visit these indigenous communities, you can see in a small scale society, not through studies and reading evidence, you can touch these practices, the effect of these practices in the way these kids behave. And they don't go to school, while our kids go to school, and they, because of the school system, education system. So, these are the main findings. There are obviously so many others, but which led me to, my third book, Cultivating Mindfulness to Raise Children Who Thrive, Why Human Connection from Before Birth Matters, because I just see the importance of the relationship, of a nurturing relationship. And, while before these studies, we knew our focus also of all organizations were mainly on the health effects of impact of the prenatal period. Now there is a focus, and that's actually what inspired me about this community, also my children, of the importance of human virtues, so that therefore the cultivation of this human virtue, even before conception, to transmit that to the children. And there wasn't this focus in the past. It was mainly about health, disease. But now we have to focus on the emotional, effect, morality, and social skills, sociability, and cooperation skills, to cooperate from before birth and during pregnancy.
So actually, we could speak days, not hours. Could you finish this beautifully by sending out your message? What is
okay, so my message to the professionals, I already expressed that, to do self-development, okay? If not the therapy necessarily, unless they have really, deep issues that require psychoanalysis or psychotherapy, to do self-development. Because what happens is that if we have unresolved traumas, we tend to project, and they interfere the quality of the work, and they interfere with pregnancy, especially if they work with pregnant women, can be a very vulnerable time where, yes, women get empowered, but is also vulnerable in terms of dynamics going on and emotions. The mother's feeling of being supported or not is transmitted to the baby. So the approach of the healthcare practitioners has to change dramatically, with having in their mind a baby who is a sentient being. So that's where prenatal psychology comes. And so not seeing just the mother, the pregnant mother, but the human being, sentient, participating in the relationship with the practitioner. And
the scholars and academics?
The scholars and academics, I would say, to keep the bridge with real life, not to isolate, with research, to keep this bridge. And many academics do, and they do a wonderful work, because otherwise the work remains confined within the university walls. Oh, yes, maybe exchanging, their research internationally, but still remain. And the language, okay? So to find a way that research, okay, if it's a scientific article, has to be written in academic language. Yes, that's fine. But also making that outcome of that research accessible to lay people, and using a different terminology. And some people, do. I mean, brilliant. Professor Dacia Narvaez from the University of Notre Dame in Indiana, she does a wonderful work. She writes for Psychology Today, so converting, so that the research is accessible to the people who need the most. And so keeping the bridge, and because that's when research is effective, and always having a holistic, integrative mindset, which can help interpreting the piece of research.
Right.
Writing in big, that's a piece of research, is not the truth.
Good. And to policymakers, what is your
policymaker? Okay, so that's an experience I haven't talked about, because as I said, 2 hours is not even enough, but I was involved with the political movements at the UK Parliament, where, and this is an example, can be a template, right? Where policymakers invite professionals to the Parliament, and that's what's happening in UK, to listen to their experience, to become aware of the gaps, so that by listening, they can, and for instance, becoming aware of prenatal psychology of the baby in the womb. It's a huge finding. So build, making new laws. Otherwise, how would that be possible? Ignorance doesn't, So, and then to the parents.
To the parents.
To the prospective, the pregnant parents, I would say, to the mothers especially, to connect, to trust their inner wisdom. Because women, indigenous women, and we all have indigenous roots, have, given birth and experienced their pregnancy with confidence for thousands of years. So trust, and read less books during pregnancy, don't look on Google, because there are ambivalent messages that are only confusing, and that's the feedback actually the mothers in my studies do, and in my work, they always complain about. And do more actually mindfulness practice, live in a mindful way, slowing down, connecting, communicating with your baby. And the parents to actually develop the capacity to accept challenging emotions, because parenting is a challenging transition, especially in our society. And so learning to accept the challenging emotion instead of fighting, embracing and seeing a resourceful value in them, and relying on support, seeking support if needed, because the community is not there in our society, especially in metropolitan cities, is not there. So turning, if is needed, to a supporter group, which focuses on, certain targets, mental health and connection with the baby, both from pregnancy. And yes, always turning to support, even if at the beginning with a friend, and if realizing that is not enough, a professional, but be open, not feeling the fear of stigmatization, because we live in a world now where stigmatizations shouldn't exist anymore, that mental challenges are a common thing for each individual.
Right.
And enjoy every single moment of their babyhood, because they just go very, very quickly.
Yeah. So, my dear, what would life be like if you were not born on Earth?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I know that there are many, many people who are doing a great, work. And, but I do believe that every single individual is necessary. We tend to believe, but life goes on even without you. I think every single individual, especially, working in this field, sacrificing themselves, putting so much effort, their work is highly valuable. So I don't know, to be honest, what would be without me, but I'm relieved, thinking that there are many now working in this field. So it will be still, valuable work. And I want to conclude saying that gratefulness, we never talk about that, and generosity and offering the work without, just unconditionally, it's a wonderful thing. It's good for health and well-being, and is rewarding, and even in long term pays off. Even if you don't see the immediate reward, there is an immediate reward because it makes you feel good. And I am now delighted to be part of the team who has founded this prenatal sciences partnership, which, with the isolation of Australia, I haven't talked about the Australia experience, other findings here, but with isolation, geographical isolation, also consequent to COVID, has really offered me this sense of connectedness, with all over the world, Europe in particular, making, alleviating this connection, geographical, this connection from my roots, and having founding someone, like you and the team, and your proactivity in turning any initiative into reality. And this doesn't happen without effort, without time availability. It doesn't. Nothing is created without time availability. It gives me great joy, even just mentioning about this project, proposing this project during a conversation, and having someone that takes it seriously and turns it, accomplishes it through efforts. So it makes us realize that we need each other.
Yeah.
We need the idea and we need the accomplishment of the idea, because without either, there would be no creation. And that's what happened in conception.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So Antonella, I will close this conversation, bringing our attention to the element of gratitude to you and your dedicated work over the years. You have so many more decades to continue to develop and contribute, and thinking of you as a reminder of community spirit, joyful experience of everyday moment, and a combinator, if this word exists, of science and art together for the benefit of humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olga, for this experience and for being here with me. Thank you. Bye. Ciao.